Often there's been a great curiosity about this strange thing the Russians suddenly injected onto the world. They had done some pre-testing, but suddenly on July the 4th, 1976, for a bicentennial present for us, the Soviets opened up some great new transmitters in the communication band, which, because of the chirping sound and the sound just like a woodpecker's bill hitting a block of wood, was immediately dubbed woodpecker by all the ham radio operators who had it interfering with their communications. And so this was really massive communication, massive transmitters, lots and lots of power. And nobody could figure out what in the world was going on. It made no sense because certainly the signals as seen could do over-the-horizon radar work, which you normally put in that same frequency band. But there were also apparently lots of characteristics which didn't fit what you would do if you were designing something that was just over-the-horizon radar at all. There would be no need for such complexity. So there's been a lot of discussion on it, and, I guess the official realization was that, or calling it, was to say it's just simply over-the-horizon radars. Well, they built a lot of them. But if you look at it through the eyes of the scalar interferometry, and I mentioned the two references and have cited them in various papers, there are other work along that line too. If that approach is used in what seems to be what Tesla had done, if you use the Tesla approach to interpret it, now one is dealing with scalar interferometry and dealing with something that can do some rather astounding potential weapon effects. With the Tesla interpretation, one of the things that would result from that line of weapons, assuming they are used as scalar interferometry weapons, one of the great things that would emerge from them would be to produce controlled energy at a distance. For example, great huge balls of controlled electromagnetic energy, or if you pulse it, great blasts of electromagnetic energy at a distance. I mentioned the business of biasing the transmitters, where you can produce either heat, like an explosion, or you could produce a cold explosion, the sudden explosive withdrawal of energy from the distant area. And in books cited incidents that are representative of what one would find if those incidents actually were occurring on that kind of scale. The incidents are there, they're real, they're documented, they're not just Tom Bearden. So there is a good solid set of admittedly circumstantial evidence that the woodpecker signals, because of all the phenomena that can be associated in the same time frame since they turned on, these phenomena very strongly suggest that this set of weapons is not just over-the-horizon radars at all, but are really Tesla weapon systems. And if they are, all the rest follows. They have one other frightening area, if this thesis is true, that is almost mind-boggling. There is a Soviet physicist, scientist named Kosnashev, and Kosnashev has produced a series of experiments in two Soviet military institutes before the fall there that showed that you could transmit any sort of disease form between cells. Any sort of infectious disease, or you can radiate one sample with nuclear radiation, gamma radiation, for example, or deadly poison, or infect them with viruses. You can transmit between cellular cultures into another cell, another sample from the same culture, the same disease electromagnetically, although the organisms won't necessarily be there. That works in literature if you pursue it. Kosnashev has several books out now that are available since the Russian system has loosened up a bit. That work has been replicated at the University of Marburg, for example, in Germany. It has been replicated at the University of Sydney in Australia, and it has been replicated by at least one researcher here in the United States. He's trained to say if there are no force fields, there's no electromagnetics. He ignores the potential that's left. He just sweeps it away and throws it away. From where we're coming from with the Tesla approach, that is the active part. That's the part that is being interfered within the bodies or whatever to cause whatever you wish to cause. If we couple it with the Kosnashev stuff, we are saying that such scalar transmitters in interferometry within the U.S. Embassy could indeed have produced any sort of disease they wish. However, it would have very strange signatures. Let me explain the signatures and how such signatures actually came about. First of all, when Nixon went as vice president to Russia, and this was first detected, he was going to visit some nuclear installations, and they carried Geiger counters, and it was detected on the Geiger counter. It's an ionization device. It detects the ionization and discharge of its own gases, and anything that will ionize its gas, it will detect. It doesn't have to be nuclear radiation. And so they thought at first that it was deadly nuclear radiation because all the counters went off. And indeed, it was not. They were irradiating the president with this stuff, with the Tesla stuff, to see if we knew what was going on. That's a beautiful intelligence probe. You pick out a high-level target like the president or, the embassy. You radiate and do some things that are obvious, not too bad, but are obvious, so they can't be missed. And then you see what happens when the system goes bananas trying to figure out what's going on. And by their actions, there's no way to fake it. You either tell them you know what's going on by your action, or you show them you don't know what's going on. There's no way to get out of it. It's 100% certain, which very few things in intelligence are. However, if I go back to the embassy, where many health changes and diseases and so forth, 3 ambassadors died of a leukemia-like illness eventually. These diseases occurred only within the embassy, in those areas where the force fields were absent and the potentials were there. And the Johns Hopkins researchers did a beautiful job, they were expert guys, of establishing the force field electromagnetic pattern. And since not a single case occurred in that area, that's by the normal electromagnetics, then reached the conclusion it therefore could not possibly be the microwave radiation. Actually, that's a false conclusion. If the radiation played no part whatsoever and you had that many changes occurred, the odds are extremely high that some of those would have occurred in the area where there were force fields and some didn't. Since that did not occur, it is a 100% correlation to the Tesla area, to the area where the potentials existed and the force fields did not. And I'm sorry, they reached exactly the wrong conclusion because the model they applied failed them. These were able scientists using only the conventional model, and the model actually showed that it was the other stuff, but led them to conclude, properly for their model, that it couldn't possibly be the electromagnetics. That's just one instance. So the woodpecker then would be able to apply because of so many signals. The scalar stuff we might not even see with our normal detectors, but yet it could do exactly the same thing, for example, in the United States alone. Now, what does that imply? If we are not too far out into left field here, if there's really a ground, as I've tried to describe here, if there really is a theoretical ground here for the use of those weapons in a Tesla mode and the use of the Kosnashiev knowledge and experimental results in here, apparently confirmed by what happened in the U.S. Embassy, then those radiators, which are active to this day, not in the conventional sense, you got to have a different detector, those radiators could conceivably create within a mass population almost the instantaneous spread of mass diseases of all kind. They would be anomalous. You'd be dying, for example, of bubonic plague, and you wouldn't have the organism. But it represents, if that part is true, it represents a biological weapon of incredible implications for population warfare. I hope to God I'm wrong. I don't think I am.